At my retirement ceremony, after 40 years without missing a single day, my family presented a humiliating video. Dad built an empire, but destroyed his family. It showed pictures of empty chairs at graduations and events where I should have been. The video ended with my wife and children announcing in front of all my colleagues, "Today we don't celebrate his career, but our liberation from his abandonment." They handed me an album with photos of my work life. Empty. I was left sitting in complete shock. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. 40 years, not a single day of absence, 14,600 days exactly, not counting weekends. Of course, it didn't matter if I had a fever, if there was a snowstorm, or if the traffic was impossible, I always arrived first at the office and left last. I built Marshall Logistics from the ground up into a company valued at over $300 million. My life, my identity, my pride. May 17th, 2023, was my day, the date I had marked on my mental calendar for the past 5 years, my retirement ceremony, the recognition of a lifetime of unwavering dedication. It's the biggest corporate event we've ever organized. Mr. Marshall, Jennifer, the head of human resources, had told me 2 weeks earlier. Executives from all branches will be coming. Even Mr. Takeda is flying from Tokyo specifically for this. I smiled at the mention of Takeda. We had closed the deal with his company in 1997, a contract that tripled our annual income. I celebrated by working all weekend to ensure the transition was perfect while my family waited for me on the trip to Disney that I had promised for months. "Your father always finds something more important than us," I heard Caroline, my wife, say to our children that night when I called to apologize. I hung up pretending the signal had been cut off. The morning of my ceremony, I put on my best suit, the navy blue Armani I bought after closing the deal with Ferguson Industries. Another lost weekend, another family celebration I didn't attend. My daughter Emily's 16th birthday, or was it Thomas's? I couldn't remember clearly. I drove to the Grand Wellington Hotel where they had booked the main hall. A huge banner hung at the entrance celebrating 40 years of excellence. "Thank you, Richard Marshall." Perfect. While parking, I noticed something strange. Thomas's old Subaru was there, and next to it, the BMW I had given Emily at her university graduation, a ceremony I arrived at when they were already picking up the chairs. I even recognized Caroline's Mercedes. I didn't expect them to come. In fact, I hadn't invited them. Our relationship had cooled considerably in recent years. When was the last time I had a real conversation with any of them? Last Christmas? No, probably at my mother-in-law's funeral 2 years ago. Caroline barely spoke to me when I arrived late, straight from a meeting. "Richard, the man of the day has arrived," exclaimed Pitt Morrison, my vice president, patting me on the back as I entered the lobby. "Everything is ready. We have a spectacular program." The hall was packed, 200 people at least, the corporate elite in full, important clients, former employees, and there, in the front row, were Caroline, Emily, and Thomas. They didn't smile. They didn't applaud when I entered. They just stared at me. "We have a surprise," Pitt whispered. "Your family has prepared something special." They didn't tell me what it is, but they wanted to be a part of this. A wave of, what was it, apprehension ran down my spine. I ignored it, as I had for decades with any inconvenient emotion. The ceremony began with the usual speeches, the chairman of the board listing my achievements, a presentation on how the company's stock had grown under my leadership, former employees telling anecdotes about my tenacity. And now, announced the master of ceremonies, we have something very special. The Marshall family has prepared a tribute for Richard. The lights dimmed, the big screen lit up. My face appeared first, a recent photo. Richard Marshall, the man behind the empire, the title read. I smiled, pleased. And then everything changed. The title faded, replaced by another. Dad built an empire but destroyed his family. The blood drained from my face. The room fell absolutely silent. What followed was a procession of images I had never seen. Emily, 8 years old, at her ballet recital, pointing to an empty chair with tears in her eyes. Thomas, 12 years old, holding a baseball trophy, looking towards the empty stands. Caroline alone at her master's graduation. Christmases, birthdays, anniversaries, all with a common element: my absence. Each photo had an exact date and explanatory text: June 24th, 2001, Thomas's first state championship. Dad was closing the deal with Westbrook. February 14th, 2008, 25th wedding anniversary. Dad was at a conference in Chicago. I wanted to get up, stop this, but my legs wouldn't respond. The room, previously filled with animated conversations, was plunged into a sepulchral silence. People looked at the floor, visibly uncomfortable. And then the three of them appeared on the screen. Caroline, her face serene but firm. Emily, now a 35-year-old woman, so much like her mother when I met her. Thomas, his jaw tense, so much like me. Today we don't celebrate his career, Caroline said, looking directly at the camera, but our liberation from his abandonment. 40 years waiting for crumbs of attention that never came. You built an empire of steel and cement, Emily continued, but you don't even know the names of your grandchildren. I admired you all my life, Thomas finished, and I spent years trying to get your attention. Today, I finally give up. The screen went dark. The lights came back on. My 3 family members stood up and walked to the stage. Caroline held something in her hands. Congratulations on your retirement, Richard, she said, holding out a book towards me. We made you an album with photos of your family life. I opened it. It was completely empty. 200 blank pages, just like your presence in our lives, Emily whispered before turning around. The 3 of them descended from the stage and walked towards the exit, leaving absolute silence behind them. 200 people holding their breath, and me, sitting with an empty album in my trembling hands, feeling the world I had built shatter. I don't remember how the ceremony ended. Everything became blurred after the door closed behind them. Pitt tried to save the situation with some comment about family always being so emotional, but it fell flat. People began to disperse, murmuring quietly. Some avoided looking directly at me, others showed a mixture of pity and embarrassment. Takeda, the Japanese executive who had flown 14 hours specifically for this event, approached me and said something I will never forget. Marcel-san, in Japan, we say the poorest man is the one who only has money. I sat there as the room emptied. The empty album was still in my hands. I couldn't let go of it as if it were an extension of myself. Jennifer, from Human Resources, was the last to approach. Do you need me to call someone, Mr. Marcel? Who could I call? I replied. It wasn't a rhetorical question. The drive home was the longest of my life. 40 minutes that seemed like 40 years. A 67-year-old man crying at the wheel of a late-model BMW. Pathetic. I entered my house, a mansion really, 6 rooms that were never used, a pool I never swam in. The silence hit me like never before. I had always valued silence, the tranquility to think, to plan business strategies. But this silence was different. It was accusatory. I went straight to the bar and poured myself a whiskey. Then another. On the 3rd glass, I began to mentally review the video. Each image, each date, each missed event. Emily's ballet recital, I was in Denver closing the acquisition of a fleet of trucks. Thomas's graduation, an urgent video conference with Chinese investors. Our 25th wedding anniversary, the presentation of quarterly results in Chicago. There was always a reason, always something crucial, urgent, essential. And now, looking back, I couldn't remember why those things had seemed more important than seeing my daughter dance or my son receive his diploma. I picked up my phone to call Caroline, but what was I going to say? I'm sorry sounded ridiculously insufficient. 40 years of absences are not fixed with an apology call. I went upstairs, past the empty rooms, including the one that had been Emily's until she left for college in 2006. I opened it for the first time in years. It was exactly as she had left it. Caroline had insisted on keeping it that way, in case she ever comes back, she would say. But we both knew that day would never come. On top of the desk was a framed photo, Emily, Thomas, and I on the beach, summer of 1998. The last vacation we took together. I had my arm around Thomas's shoulders and I was smiling. I didn't remember that exact moment, but there was clearly a time when I was present, when I was part of their lives. When did everything change? When did I decide that my presence in the office was more valuable than my presence at home? That night, I didn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, alone, as I had been since Caroline moved to the guest room in 2012 and finally left in 2015. It no longer makes sense to pretend this is a marriage, were her exact words. I didn't contradict her. I was too busy preparing the expansion into the South American market. At 5:43 in the morning, my phone started ringing. It didn't stop for the next few hours. Calls, messages, emails. Uncomfortable colleagues offering support. Some clients with messages of solidarity. Even Sam Garner, my lifelong business rival, sent me a message. I always thought you were a lucky bastard in business. Now I see that you simply paid a price I wasn't willing to pay. At 9:17 a.m., a message arrived. The recording of the event leaked. It's everywhere. I'm sorry, Richard. I immediately searched it. CEO humiliated by his family at retirement ceremony was the title of the video that already had hundreds of thousands of views. The comments were ruthless. Instant karma. Deserved. This man lost everything without realizing it. At 10:22 a.m., my assistant of the last 15 years, Margaret, sent me an email. I always admired your work ethic, Mr. Marcel. Now I understand why. I never asked about your family. On some level, I always knew there was something broken there. I hope you find peace. I stared at the screen. Margaret, who knew every minute of my schedule for 15 years, who knew exactly how many meetings, trips, and calls had occupied my life, she knew too. Everyone knew. The Emperor was naked, and I was the only one who hadn't realized it. At 11:45 a.m., the doorbell rang. It was Philip Chen, my lawyer for 30 years. I hadn't called him. I came as soon as I saw the video, he said as he entered. His normally impassive face showed genuine concern. This is going to affect the leadership transition at the company. The board is worried about the public image. Seriously, Phil? Is that what worries you now? He took off his glasses, something he rarely did. Richard, we've known each other for 3 decades. I was at your wedding. I saw your children grow up, from afar, like you. My wife left me 12 years ago. My children barely speak to me. We're the same kind of man. I had never seen Phil vulnerable. It was disconcerting. The difference is, I don't have $300 million in stock to console me, he continued. And yet I would give everything I have for a second chance with my family. He got up to leave, but before he left he stopped. It's not about the company anymore, Richard. For the first time in your life, this isn't about Marshall Logistics. When he left, I was left in silence again, a silence that echoed with truths I had avoided for 4 decades. At 3:28 p.m., a text message arrived from Thomas. I hope you understand now. It was the last straw. I completely collapsed. Me, Richard Marcel, the man who had handled corporate crises involving millions of dollars without sweating, was sobbing uncontrollably on the floor of my home office. The phone kept ringing, the outside world kept spinning, but for the first time in 40 years, none of that mattered. On the 3rd day after the incident, as it was now called in business circles, I decided I couldn't keep hiding in my house. I had ignored 47 calls, 103 messages, and almost 200 emails. The board of directors had issued a bland statement about private family matters and respect for Mr. Marcel's career path. A pathetic attempt at damage control. The video had reached more than 2 million views. My life, my failure, turned into viral entertainment. That morning, while shaving, I really looked at myself in the mirror for the first time in years. Deep wrinkles, tired eyes, hardened expression. I looked like a stranger. Who was this man who had sacrificed everything for an empire that now meant nothing? I made a decision. I wouldn't call Caroline or the kids. I wouldn't beg for forgiveness. I wouldn't try to justify myself. All of that would be for my benefit, not theirs. I had stolen enough of their time already. Instead, I did something I had never done. I looked up their current addresses. My own daughter had lived in 3 different places in the last few years, and I didn't even know where. Thomas had moved to Colorado. Caroline was still in town, but in a neighborhood I never frequented. I drove to the old coffee shop where we used to have breakfast on Sundays when the kids were little. Before Sunday meetings became commonplace. Before business trips took priority. Cornerstone Cafe, it was still called that, though it was more elegant now. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a table by the window. I opened my laptop and started writing an email. I erased it. Too formal. I took out a sheet of paper from my briefcase. Better this way, more personal. Caroline, Emily, Thomas, I'm not writing to apologize. Words cannot undo 40 years of absences. Nor to justify myself. There is no justification. I am writing to tell you that I heard you. I saw the video. I saw the empty chairs, the missed moments, the spaces I left in your lives. I saw it all, for the first time. I'm not asking you to forgive me, or to give me another chance. I just want you to know that I finally understand the damage I caused. The empty album is on my desk. I look at it every day as a reminder of what I sacrificed for things that now seem unimportant. I have instructed my lawyers to establish a trust with 70% of my shares in the company. Not to compensate you, I know that's impossible, but because it's what should always have been yours. Money won't fix anything, I know, but at least it will serve some useful purpose in your lives. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know that, however late, I finally heard your message. Richard. I read the letter several times. It seemed insufficient, but it was honest. I folded it, put it in 3 envelopes, and wrote the addresses. Leaving the cafe, I ran into Robert Jennings, a former client I hadn't seen in years. Marcel. My God, man, you've been the talk of the business world, he exclaimed, too loudly. That video, brutal. Are you okay? No, Robert, I'm not okay, and I probably never was. His awkward smile faded. Oh, I see. Well, if you need anything. Thank you, but there's nothing you can do. No one can. I sent the letters that same day. Then I canceled all my social media accounts, turned off my phone, and spent the next week reorganizing my affairs. I called Phil to begin the process of the trust. I formally resigned from my position on the board of directors. And I began to consider selling the house. Too big, too empty, too many memories that were never formed. 10 days after the incident, someone knocked on my door. It was Thomas. Dad, he said simply, standing in the doorway. He had dark circles under his eyes and seemed as uncomfortable as I felt. Thomas, I replied, feeling my heart race. Do you want to come in? He nodded briefly. I led him to the living room, where we never sat when he lived here. The truth is, we hardly ever used the common areas of the house. I received your letter, he finally said. Emily and Mom did too. I understand. No, you don't understand, he retorted, running his hand through his hair, exactly like I did when I was nervous. That video wasn't our idea, at least not as it was presented. What? Emily had prepared a genuine video about your career. Yes, it included photos of events where you were absent, but the tone was different. A reminder, not a public accusation. The producer Mom hired edited it at the last minute. He added that title, that music, those texts. He transformed it into something much more aggressive than we planned. By the time we saw it, it was too late. I was speechless. Thomas continued, Don't get me wrong, we are hurt. The absences were real, the damage was real, But we never wanted to humiliate you like that, in public, in front of all your colleagues. Part of me wanted to feel relieved. Another part knew that this didn't fundamentally change anything. Why are you telling me this now? Thomas sighed. Because your letter impacted us. It was the first time we felt you were really listening to us, that you understood. And then we realized we had gone too far, or at least that the video had gone too far. We were silent for a moment. The ticking of the old clock marking seconds that seemed like hours. Emily is pregnant, he finally said. 7 months. You're going to be a grandfather in August. The news hit me like a wave. I didn't know. How could I know? We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. Another silence. We rejected the trust, he continued. Money was never the problem. We never lacked anything material. We lacked you. I nodded, unable to speak. Mom says you can call her if you want. She's willing to talk. Emily will need more time. But the baby changes things. And you, Thomas? What do you want? He looked out the window at the garden, perfectly maintained by gardeners who came when I wasn't there. I want to try. I don't know if it will work. There's too much water under the bridge, but I want to try. That afternoon, Thomas and I talked more than we had in the last 10 years combined. He told me about his work as an environmental engineer in Colorado, about his girlfriend, Stephanie, about how he had stopped wearing ties because they reminded him too much of me. When he left, he promised to come back. I don't know if he will, but the mere fact that he said he would try meant more than any $1 million contract I had ever signed. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. Not because everything was fixed. Nothing was fixed, and perhaps it never would be completely. But because I had finally stopped running from the truth. The viral video was eventually replaced by new scandals, new stories. The business world kept spinning without me. Marshall Logistics announced a new CEO. The stock fluctuated. Life went on. 3 weeks later, I called Caroline. The conversation was difficult, full of awkward silences and painful truths, but at least we talked. In the end, she agreed to have coffee the following week. I don't know if I'll ever get my family back. Probably not, at least not as it could have been. There are wounds too deep, absences too prolonged. But every morning, I open that empty album they gave me at the ceremony, and every day I paste something small, a text message from Thomas, a note about the call with Caroline, information about the baby that's on the way. 40 years building a paper empire that crumbled in an instant. Now, at 67, I'm learning what I should have always known. That true foundations are not built with contracts and acquisitions, but with moments, with presence, with chairs that are not empty. It's a lesson that came too late, but at least it finally arrived. In the end, true fortune is not measured in assets or professional achievements, but in shared moments and chairs that weren't left empty. I built an empire that impressed strangers while losing the only people who really mattered. The recognition I so longed for came in the most painful way possible, showing me that 40 years of business success cannot compare to 40 years of family memories. Don't make my mistake. Work will always be there, but ballet recitals, graduations, and anniversaries only happen once. No professional achievement is worth the price of missing out on the lives of those you love.